What's up, guys? Golden Knight here. At some point you decide that you are going to draw every day. You start full of energy, determined to finally take drawing seriously. In the first few days it works. You sit down, draw, feel that you are progressing. But then it starts to get difficult. Every day a little more difficult. You open the sketchbook and the desire doesn't come. And then a day arrives when you simply don't do it. And then another. And suddenly you look back and it has been 2 weeks since you touched a pencil. What most people conclude at that moment is that they lack discipline. That they are not dedicated enough. That other people can do it because they are more focused, more motivated. This conclusion seems logical, but it is completely wrong. The problem is that the way you are trying to build this habit goes against the way the human brain actually works. And while you don't understand this, you will keep repeating the same cycle of excited beginnings, gradual decline, and abandonment with guilt. What I will show you here is a real analysis of the reasons why this cycle repeats itself, and what you can change in a concrete way to get out of it. The environment that sabotages you. Most people think about the habit of drawing as a purely internal matter. Discipline, motivation, mindset, willpower. And so they end up completely ignoring one of the most determining factors for consistency, the physical environment where the practice happens. The environment is not neutral. It acts on you all the time. And when the environment is not configured for the habit you want to build, you are fighting an invisible battle every time you try to sit down to draw. Think about what happens when you decide to draw on a normal day. Maybe your materials are in a drawer, or in a cabinet, or in a corner of the desk covered by other things. You need to search, organize a space, maybe move the laptop away, maybe find the right pencil. This process might take 3 minutes. It seems insignificant, but those 3 minutes represent friction, a resistance between intention and action, and the human brain hates this. Studies about habit formation consistently show that reducing friction, even a little, increases the probability that you will perform the task you are trying to turn into a habit. The environment literally decides for you before you have the chance to consciously decide. There is also another layer, less obvious, of the environment that affects practice, the visual and sensory triggers present in the space where you work. If you draw at the same desk where you work, where you watch series, where you talk to people, where you shop online, your brain associates that space with a huge variety of different behaviors and mental states. When you sit there to draw, you are not sitting in a space for practice. You are sitting in a space for everything, and the brain does not know exactly which mode to activate. This generates a dispersion that you feel as difficulty concentrating. The most powerful change you can make in your environment is to leave your materials visible and accessible, create a dedicated physical space even if it is small, and remove from your field of vision during the session everything that activates other behaviors. It does not need to be a studio. It can be a corner of the table, a specific chair, a different light. What matters is that this arrangement communicates to the brain that when you are there, you draw. Over time, the environment itself becomes a trigger for the mental state of practice, and the effort to begin decreases organically. Practice without intention that drains your energy. There is a huge difference between sitting down to draw and sitting down to draw with an objective. This difference seems small, but it determines everything. How much you take advantage of the session, how much you evolve, and mainly whether you will want to come back the next day. When you practice without a clear intention, what happens in practice is that you spend the first minutes deciding what you are going to do. You open the sketchbook, look at the blank page, think of some options, discard them, think of others, maybe start something that you abandoned halfway because it was not working. This process consumes mental energy, the energy of decision-making, which is limited and does not easily recover during the session. What makes this even more complicated is that this expenditure does not appear as physical tiredness. You do not feel pain, you do not necessarily feel sleepy, but you feel resistance, that sensation that drawing feels heavy today, that maybe it is not a good day. And you attribute this to mood, to disposition, to chance. But most of the time it is simply the result of a session that began without direction and spent resources before even producing anything. Before opening the sketchbook, decide what you are going to practice. When the session begins with this level of clarity, the brain does not need to spend energy deciding. It goes straight to doing. And the doing, even if the result is imperfect, generates a feeling of real progress that feeds the desire to return tomorrow. The belief that motivation comes before action. Most artists wait for the right moment, the right energy, the right inspiration, and when all of this aligns, they feel ready to draw. The problem is that this model is inverted. It describes exactly the cycle that keeps people trapped in inconsistency, waiting for a random condition that rarely appears on its own, and when it appears, it does not last very long. Contrary to what many people believe, motivation is a consequence. It appears after action, not before. When you sit down and start drawing, even without desire, even with resistance, the brain begins to engage with the visual problem in front of it, begins to make decisions, and this engagement generates a state of presence that feeds the desire to continue. Neuroscientists call this the law of behavioral activation. Behavior comes before the emotional state that we normally associate with it. You do not wait to feel like running to put on your sneakers. You put on your sneakers and start running. The desire appears after a few minutes in motion. With drawing it works the same way. What makes this pattern of waiting for the right moment to draw especially destructive for those who try to draw every day is that the days without motivation are exactly the most important days. Not because suffering is nice, but because it is on these days that the habit truly consolidates. Anyone can draw when they are excited. Real consistency is built on bad days, on days when you open the sketchbook without energy and do something anyway. These days teach your brain that the behavior does not depend on a specific emotional condition. And when the brain learns this, the resistance that tries to stop you begins to decrease. The practical change here is to stop negotiating with motivation before starting. Do not ask yourself if you feel like it. Create an entry so small and so automatic that the decision to begin does not need any motivation at all. 5 minutes. 1 sketch. 1 line. What matters is not the quality of what you will produce that day, it is the fact that you open the sketchbook. Because when you open the sketchbook, most of the time you continue. And even when you do not continue, you maintain the pattern. The absence of a system to record your progress. One of the most common reasons people abandon the habit of drawing is that they cannot see their own evolution. Not because the evolution is not happening, but because progress in visual skills is slow, and without a form of record, it becomes completely invisible in daily life. You look at your drawing from today and mentally compare it with a vague idea of what you used to do before, and this mental comparison is imprecise, distorted by memory and by the natural tendency to underestimate your own development. The result is a feeling of stagnation that is not real, but that is powerful enough to demotivate you from continuing. The human brain needs concrete evidence of progress to sustain behaviors over time. When you can tangibly see that you are improving, the brain releases reward signals that reinforce the behavior and increase the probability of repetition. When this feedback does not exist, the behavior loses the emotional support it needs to maintain itself, regardless of how much conscious effort you apply. A recording system does not need to be sophisticated to work. Just keep your old drawings and date them. What matters is that the record is honest, without future edits. Because when you look at this record 3 months later, you see real evidence of your progress. And this evidence has enormous motivational power, and it is unquestionable. It shows something that you can verify with your own eyes. Every minute counts. There is a belief that many people carry about what it means to truly practice. It is the idea that short sessions do not count. That drawing for 20 minutes is almost the same as not having drawn at all. The problem begins with the way this belief interacts with the reality of life. Most people do not have large blocks of free time available frequently enough to build a daily habit based on long sessions. There are days with commitments, with fatigue, with unexpected events, with demands that take up the available time until only a gap of 20 or 30 minutes remains. And because you believe that this is not enough time, you do not draw. And when this happens repeatedly, the habit breaks, because habits are built through the repetition of the behavior, not through the duration of each episode. A 15-minute session that happens every day is much more powerful for habit formation than a 2-hour session that happens once a week. There is also a question of quality that contradicts the idea of those who believe that more time means more learning. Human attention is not linear. It has a peak of quality in the first 30 to 40 minutes of a focused cognitive task, and then it begins to decline gradually. This means that a 2-hour session often contains 40 minutes of high-quality practice followed by 90 minutes of practice in degraded mode, where you are physically present but cognitively dispersed. You are holding the pencil, but you are not really learning. A short and intense session, where you enter with clear intention and leave before attention degrades, can produce more real learning than a long session where quality dilutes over time. When you understand this, tight days stop being lost days. The difference between perfect consistency and real consistency. We have reached the point that may be the most important of everything discussed here, because this is what determines whether everything you have learned will translate into something lasting or will dissolve the first time life gets in the way. When you start a new habit, You believe that you will draw every day, without exception, without failure, without interruption. And in the first few days it works exactly like that. But then a day comes when you cannot. It could be illness, it could be an unavoidable commitment, it could be an emotional collapse, it could simply be a day that went completely off the rails, and you do not draw. And then something very specific happens in your head. You feel that the perfect streak has been interrupted and now the habit is compromised. You commit a slip, interpret that slip as evidence of total failure, and then completely abandon the behavior you were trying to build. One day without drawing becomes a week. 1 week becomes a month. And the cycle starts again from zero with the next wave of motivation. In reality, the slip itself has minimal impact on the development of the habit in the long term. What has enormous impact is what you do the day after the slip. If you return, the habit survives almost intact. If you do not return, the habit dies. Consistency is not a perfect sequence without interruptions. It is a pattern of return. It is the ability to lose 1 or 2 days and come back without drama or guilt. You simply open the sketchbook and draw. You understand that what happened does not undo what has been built. If this video helped you in any way, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next ones. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. Don't forget to take a look at the description. There are several important links there that can help you even more. See you in the next video.